Welcome back to the Leadership Lab. Today, we're going to go through a quite contentious study about aesthetics and leadership. So, to start, let's do a thought experiment. If you imagine two managers or two leaders walk into the same room, they're the same age, same education, same performance history. One of them, though, has an objectively attractive romantic partner, and the other one doesn't. Who are you going to trust more as a leader? And if you're saying that, well, that shouldn't really matter, you're right. Perhaps it shouldn't. But according to a 2022 study published in the Leadership Quarterly, it does matter. And here's the kicker: having an attractive partner increases how competent and how influential a man is perceived as a leader, but not a woman. So let's unpack this. The study asked a really deceptively but simple question: can your romantic partner impact your leadership evaluation based on their attractiveness? I know it sounds like a stretch, but it's rooted in what is known as implicit leadership theory, which is the mental shortcuts we all use to judge someone and their leadership ability. And within this theory, we also associate things like height and voice and facial symmetry and even posture. And we also associate leadership with status cues. In this case, what about who someone is dating? The researchers hypothesized several things. First is that attractive partners may serve as status symbols. Second is that this status symbol could boost perceived leadership, especially for men, and that it could also do nothing or even backfire with women. So to test these theories, the researchers ran a series of experiments. Participants of their study read bios of hypothetical professionals with photos. Each target was paired with a photo of an attractive or unattractive partner. Participants then rated that individual leadership ability, competence, and promotional potential based on their perception of attractiveness. The targets that were rated were balanced across genders, so both men and women were shown with both types of partners, both attractive and unattractive. And the researchers wanted to know, does a partner's attractiveness boost your perceived leadership? And then, does this affect change if you're a male or a female? So here's where this gets controversial. For male targets, having an attractive partner increased perceptions of leadership competence. But for female targets, there was no benefit that was observed. And in some cases, the rating slightly dropped. So in other words, an attractive partner does in fact act as a status booster, particularly for leadership, but only if you're a man. Well, why? The researchers theorized that this is because of entitlement cues and gendered status perceptions. In evolutionary and psychology terms, when a man is seen with a highly attractive partner, people tend to infer resources, power, and dominance with that man. But when a woman is seen with an attractive male partner, the reverse inference is not made. Instead, what people do is that people focus on a woman's appearance or likability rather than her perceived competence or authority. So what this reveals about leadership is that non-performance cues do in fact shape leadership perception. That doesn't necessarily mean it shapes leadership performance, just perception. That's what we're talking about right now. So you're not necessarily being judged on what you do at a first glance. You're being judged on what people assume that things in your life, in this case, a partner, signal about you. We like to say that leadership is about merit. And perhaps we can say that leadership performance is about merit. However, people are still going to assign leadership and trust based on some really deep-seated heuristics. In other words, mental shortcuts about who you're with, how you look, and how you carry yourself. Now, granted, this does create a problem, particularly for women. Men get status symbols or status from their partner's attractiveness. But unfortunately, a woman seems to get no such boost. And as far as the study is concerned, it may even impact them negatively. Now, this isn't necessarily about being what's fair or unfair. This is just how real world perception dynamics impact what most leadership models ignore. And so there's some uncomfortable truths that are worth discussing. First is that, again, male leaders benefit from their partner's appearance. The more attractive your partner is a man, the more status you're going to be given. Female leaders are judged differently and more independently. And in some cases, they're even penalized if their partner is being perceived as too attractive compared to they are. This reinforces an unfortunate but apparently real double bind that women face in terms of leadership. One is that they need to be competent, but they can't be too assertive. People seem to be more sensitive to power dynamics when it comes from a woman leader. Second, it's important to be attractive as a female leader, but unfortunately, their looks don't necessarily impact their perceived leadership as much as men do. And then being in a relationship seems to be important, but it can't be one that triggers jealousy or questions or mistrust. And it seems as if that this is more of a dilemma for women. And I know this is contentious, but this isn't just theoretical. It seems to affect who gets promoted, who's going to get funded, and who's going to be seen as leadership material. So what do we do with this information? Well, first is being aware. If you're evaluating someone's leadership, ask yourself, am I reacting to their resume, their competence, their experience, or am I responding to certain social signals, in this case, the partner that they're with? We need to consider how we frame leadership. There's a halo effect that seems to benefit men more so than women when it comes to their partner's attractiveness. But attractiveness and status, while they impact leadership perception, they don't determine leadership performance, and they shouldn't necessarily determine influence. But it does. So systems that are built in organizations to facilitate leadership need to consider that and need to make sure that their people are looking beyond surface level impressions. For men in leadership roles, you should be mindful of how you're being elevated because of an unearned status cue. Now, I'm a pragmatist, so I think it's prudent that men understand that they can get their status elevated by being with a more attractive partner, but that doesn't necessarily make them a better leader. So even if you are being perceived as a leader, make sure you are earning the trust that you are given via that position. When it comes to women in leadership, understand that these biases are, yes, unfair, but very real. You should also know that authentic competence will eventually cut through the noise, particularly environments that are going to prioritize outcome over optics. So understand the environment that you're in. And if you're in one that doesn't facilitate your competence rising to the top, then perhaps consider finding another organization that does, if that's something that you're pursuing. So at the end of the day, this study underscores something that is crucial in terms of leadership perception. Yes, your aesthetics and your partner's aesthetics are going to impact how you're perceived, but it doesn't necessarily impact how you perform as a leader. Nevertheless, you need to understand that perception is going to be shaped by the people that you surround yourself with, how you present yourself, particularly your status, even if it's unintentional. And there are going to be subconscious cues that others will pick up on. So understand what they are and leverage them to your benefit. You can either ignore this or you can understand it and play the game better and not be blindsided by evolutionary psychology and people's natural perceptions. So to recap, does your partner's attractiveness make you a better leader? No, it doesn't make you a better leader. However, if you're a man, it does seem to increase the likelihood that you will be perceived as a better leader. If you're a woman, it seems to have 0 to a negative impact on whether you are being perceived as a leader. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are and what you think, that's the world we live in. So take that for what it's worth. If you want to dig deeper into psychology behind leadership perception, social status, unconscious bias, well, keep watching the streams, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. If you want to work with me personally, look for the leadership intake form at the bottom of the YouTube description.